Well, you're an attentive audience. Everyone got quiet. I'm not going to say anything that special. I'm sorry. Well, welcome to BIMI for another one of our Tuesday night talks. My name is George Davis, and on the half of the board of directors, we're thrilled to have Sarah Callan and Meg Rondo here tonight. Our mission is to inspire appreciation and conservation of our saltwater environment. And we have tonight a talk about seals, which have become a large part of our Block Island saltwater environment. And we all want to know more about that. Besides our Tuesday talks, BIMI has many programs for youth, and some of them include things such as squid dissection, which is my first introduction to BIMI. It's always sold out. Now, you may not want to do that, but it's something to check out. We also have beach explorations, dockside explorations, and if you support our mission and the types of programs that we are offering, please consider a donation. We are a nonprofit, and everything we do is self-funded. Now, to introduce Sarah Callan. She is the manager of the Animal Rescue Program at Mystic Aquarium and has been a key contact for us here at Block Island for many years. Many of you have known her and have listened to her before, I'm sure. And this year, we also have another Mystic employee here working with us year-round on a part-time basis, Megan Rondo, who is monitoring our seals and has been doing so since February of this year. This is a really special situation for all of us. And we know Sarah will talk about our new relationship with Mystic as part of her presentation. That's all I've got to say, and that's more than enough. So please welcome Sarah and Meg.
Thanks, George. Here, Meg, come up here. Everyone needs to meet you, Meg. This is Meg, everybody. So for those of you who don't know Meg, you'll see her on island if you're out here a lot. But she's our new data specialist with our program, and I'll speak to that in a little bit in my presentation as well. All right, well, to start, we just came from an amazing dinner at Dead-Eye Dick's, so I want to send a big shout out to them and a thank you for everything that you're doing for the Tuesday night talks and to sponsor our dinners as well. So we really, really appreciate that, and the food is amazing. So round of applause for Dead-Eye Dick's, everyone. Yeah. All right, well, I'm really excited to be here tonight to speak with you all about the seal population on Block Island, which I know has been a bit of a hot topic lately. We're seeing a lot more seals around here, which is very exciting because seals are very important for the ecosystem and the environment here around Block Island. So I will start off by giving a little bit of a background about myself and our program, and then we'll dive right into all the good stuff that has to do with seals. People always ask me about my career, so just really quickly, I actually have a degree in psychology, which is a big surprise for a lot of people, but I try to focus on animal behavior. And then I got as much experience as I could with many different species as I wanted to pursue a career in this field, but I had no idea what direction I wanted to take that in. So I just tried to get as much experience as I could. I lived in Hawaii for about 5 years. I lived in Australia for a year, did a lot of research and worked at various aquariums and rehab facilities. And then I had an opportunity to go to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands in Hawaii, and I was working with endangered Hawaiian monk seals out there. Really excited about this opportunity. It was on a remote, uninhabited island for 4 months, showering in the ocean, washing our dishes in the ocean, everything like that. I also expected this to be the most pristine, beautiful place ever, which it was. And that's the island I was on, Laysan Island right there. What it ended up being was just completely filled with marine debris. So this was so surprising to me. We were so far removed from civilization. And we were basically in the middle of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which I'm sure a lot of us have heard of. It's about 5 times the size of Texas. So my job as a researcher very quickly turned into a job disentangling animals There were albatross that were born on this island, as you can see right there. They're fledgling. They aren't able to fly yet. Those are a lot of chicks. A lot of the chicks don't survive. And so the picture right here is actually one of the chicks' stomachs. So we were seeing everyday items like bottle caps, lighters, toothbrushes, scissors. I found kids' toys in the stomachs of albatross. And all of this came from the United States, Asia, all over. So these currents are taking all this trash that we throw out and we don't see where it ends up. And a lot of it ends up in the ocean. So this was very surprising and a bit disheartening to me, but this really fueled my passion to be a voice for these animals, essentially. So that's kind of how my career path was really driven from that experience. And I want to learn as much as I can about these animals and what's going on in the environment that's directly affecting them. So, very fortunate to have this job at Mystic Aquarium where I can be a voice for the animals. I've been here for 8 years and it's been the best job. Get to help educate and then also get to respond and give these animals that are very deserving of a second chance at life. So, just a really quick background on our program for anyone that doesn't really know about it. Our animal rescue program is part of the Greater Atlantic Regional Stranding Network. So it's all different stranding organizations from Maine down to Virginia. And we all work together. Our coverage area consists of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Fishers Island, New York. Most of our responses, over 80% of our responses, are in the state of Rhode Island. And a lot of those responses are now coming from Block Island, which is how our partnership with BIMI has really flourished and grown because we've been working really hard together on a lot of these responses because living on an island, as a lot of you know, comes with a lot of different challenges. And so the only way that we can really succeed in a lot of our rescues and getting these animals the care that they need and conservation is to work together. And so it really takes a village to do a lot of this. So we're so fortunate to have BIMI as a partner. And I'll talk a little bit about more of the things that are to come for the future with our two organizations. But this is a little snapshot of our coverage area. So we have a 24-hour hotline. Sorry, Val, I'm realizing I'm getting out of my zone here. Okay, thank you. So we have a 24-hour hotline. So we get calls from 8 in the morning till, very late at night. We had a call at 9 o'clock last night that we had to go out to. So we don't have a normal 8-hour day, that's for sure. We have 4 full-time staff, and then Meg, who is paid through for the state of Rhode Island. We have about 500 first responder volunteers with our program. So we're very heavily volunteer-based, and that's because we get multiple calls about animals. A lot of the responses we go on require a lot of resource and personnel, so we need all that help. And then we have 37 in-house volunteers that work directly with the care of the animals in the clinic. And so for our SEAL responses, we are one of the only organizations in that whole stranding network that I showed you on that map that does SEAL rehabilitation. So we get requests from outside organizations to transfer animals to us for care, in addition to the animals that we bring in from our coverage area. And when animals come in, we give them, any chance that they can get. So we'll do all sorts of diagnostics, and we also collect a lot of samples to look for diseases and stuff like that they might have that are also zoonotic that could transfer to people as well. Some types of responses that we do live dolphin responses, which are a lot more heavily involved. We have large whale response, so necropsies. These are really, really important because there's 3 unusual mortality events declared for species of whales in our coverage area, which means that there's been an increase in mortalities of those species over a short period of time. And those unusual mortality events have been declared since 2016 and 2017 for various whale species. So we have been seeing that increase in mortalities of these species since those years. And so it's essentially an investigation to try to find out as much information as we can as to what might be causing these animals to die. And what we're finding is a lot of these deaths are coming from vessel strikes. And when you think about it, we're seeing a lot more whales in our area. They're feeding right at the surface, and there's a lot more boat traffic lately, whether it's recreational boating, there's cargo ships coming through cruise lines. So we're actually seeing a lot more interactions because of how many more whales are in the area. And that has to do with climate change and food resources, because they're not going to be here if there isn't food. And so all those interactions and factors coming together are leading to that unusual mortality event. And so we really work closely with state partners for these types of responses because of how many resources it takes to be involved in them. And then we also have live large whale responses, which aren't very frequent at all. I actually went on my first live large whale response this year, which was a fin whale. So these are also really, really difficult cases because these animals typically strand for a reason, and that's because they are very sick. So this case in particular was a suspect infectious disease case because of the necropsy we conducted and the condition that these tissues and the organs were in during that necropsy examination. So we're still awaiting the pathology report for this case. We do sea turtle responses. Actually, this sea turtle in this photo here is from Block Island at the North Light. Sea turtles typically strand in the summer due to vessel strike cases because they are right at the surface of the water. And then also cold stunning in the wintertime, they go into a hypothermic state. And then, surprise, we have manatee responses in our areas as well. I'm a little nervous. I think these might become a little more frequent with how warm the waters are getting. But we had a live manatee response last year in September. And then about 2 years before that, we had a manatee come in for rehab from Cape Cod. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some more manatees in our area in the future. So we are preparing for rehab for manatees. And then we obviously have our seal rehab clinic. And so that's where a lot of seals, especially from Block Island, are coming for rehab if they come for respiratory disease, wounds, all sorts of entanglements. They'll come here, and this is kind of a snapshot of our facility, a bird's eye view of the units that they're in, which are essentially like hospital rooms. I like to think of it. So it's not some big pool. When you go to a hospital, you're not going to get a penthouse suite or apartment. It's supposed to be really short-term care, and we want to get them out the door as quick as possible. And then we have a search sea turtle rehab clinic, which was new. This was built in 2019 and has really allowed us to expand our sea turtle efforts, which goes a long way because sea turtles that we respond to, there's critically endangered species like the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. And so this allows us to expand those conservation efforts by rehabbing and releasing animals that are going to really make that big impact on the population as a whole. A little snapshot here of some of the rehab care that goes into these animals. And then these are additional rehab pools that we have that are behind the scenes. So if we do have a cetacean or a dolphin or a manatee that needs rehab, or even a seal that might be with us for a year because of whatever condition it has, they'll go in one of these pools that are away and removed from the public to really limit our interaction with our animals. Because when they come in for rehab, we try not to look at them, and we only handle them whenever they need to be when they need to have a procedure done or anything like that. So we want to set them up for success as best as possible before we release them back to the wild. And then we also have an animal hospital. So this is where we conduct multiple procedures on animals. We work very closely with our veterinary team. It's a really great facility, and our most common procedures for seals particularly are amputations. And then we get harp seals that come down from the Arctic because they're used to eating so much snow and ice for that extra hydration. When they come down here, they often are used to eating the substrate that they're on, which down here we don't have that snow and ice. So they'll eat sand and rocks, and they have bellies full of pounds of rocks in their stomachs. So we do have to remove those as well. And the goal for every single animal that comes into our care is to get them to that release stage. So it's a really great event. And we actually, for anyone who's going to be off island on Thursday, we have a release of 4 seals at Hammonasset State Park Thursday morning, if anyone's interested in joining us for that. But the release is going to be at 9 a.m. at Hammonasset. All right, so let's talk about seals. Never did I ever think that my career was going to be based around these blubber balls, but they're pretty awesome. Seals are part of the pinniped family, which consists of sea lions, seals, and walruses. So they've been around for a while. They've been around for about 28 to 30 million years. And they've evolved from the muscellid family, which actually consists of bears and weasels and otters. So these guys were land animals, and their body has been evolved to be shaped like very that slender body, so they can move really easily in the water. And they're very, very agile. Not so much on land, though. If you see them on land, they're pretty awkward. Some common seal species that we have in our coverage area and on Block Island, you'll see these 3 seal species. So that's the gray seals. They're here all year round. They typically pup in the winter, so December till about February. And then we have our harbor seals. These guys pup in the summer months, mostly up north, so we don't see too many harbor seal pups in our area. And then the harp seals. These guys come down from northern Canada, the Arctic. They're here from about January till April. And you'll notice the different coat patterns on them. So we have some mottled coat patterns on the gray seals and the harbor seals. For the harp seals, they have more distinct individual spots on them. So that's one way to distinguish the different species. And the gray seals have that more elongated snout on them. Adult gray seals get to be anywhere from about 700 to 900 pounds. So they're very large animals. They're also very aggressive species. So if you see them on the beach, they look really cute, but they have very, very sharp teeth at a young age. And those teeth and that mouth have a lot of bacteria in them. You don't want to get bitten by a gray seal. So aside from all the federal protections that go into keeping people away from them, they can also transmit a lot of zoonotic diseases too. So another reason to keep your pets away from them and for people to stay away from them. So the seal population prior to 1972, so the 19th and 20th century, there was actually a bounty in Massachusetts and Maine where you got $5 if you brought a seal nose or tail to the town hall. There was also culling of seals in eastern Canada. And so these 2 things combined really decimated the population almost completely. And so in 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act came into play, and this prevents anyone from taking. So I know that kind of word has been in the public eye a lot. So the taking of animals. This does not just mean killing an animal. Take means harassing. It means disrupting. So if you're changing an animal's behavior, that is a take. So this really prevents that take of seals, so protecting them and letting them rest peacefully. So currently the gray seal population has rebounded, which is so exciting. The population between the United States and Canada is around 450,000 animals. And one of our first responders actually took this photo, so I'll give her a little shout out too. She has some amazing photos online that she takes of our seals from a very far distance. So we want to stay at least 150 feet away from them. So seals, some fun facts. They gather in large groups during mating and molting season. So once a year, seals go through something called a catastrophic molt. They're going to shed their outer layer of skin and fur. So they get a brand new coat. And that typically happens in the winter after they're done pupping and mating, they're going to molt. They can dive up to 1,500 feet and they can hold their breath for up to an hour. So very long time. And typically the average lifespan is around 25 to 35 years. Normal seal behavior. So these guys are very, very awkward on land. They primarily just use those front flippers to undulate on their belly so they look like a worm. They do not use their hind flippers at all on land. So we get a lot of calls to our hotline because I think people are used to those sea lions and how they are very agile on land. Seals lack that rotating hip bone that sea lions have that allow them to climb on rocks and move really quickly on land. So seals look awkward. They look like those hind flippers are just hanging out there, and that's how they are. But those flippers have a really great purpose when they're in the water because they can use that whole hind end to propel themselves in the water. So they're very quick and agile for hunting and escaping predators out there. For diets and feeding, so they're opportunistic feeders. They're not picky at all. They'll eat whatever's in front of them. So they like sand eels, hake, cod, haddock, flatfish, crustaceans, squid, octopus. And a study was done where the researchers were looking at seal scat. And so their poop, and that helped them determine that about 48% of their diet were actually sand eels. So not fish like people suspect. Almost half the diet are sand eels. And their diet actually varies by age, the season. So if they're going to molt, they want to gain a lot of weight before they molt because they're not going to eat for about 3 weeks while they're molting. It's really uncomfortable. They're on land for a while. And so depending on the time of year will really affect how much they're eating. And a seal will eat about 4 to 6% of their body weight. So if you look at a seal, we get a lot of weanlings that are around 60 pounds, and you have your large adults that get to be about 600, 700, 800 pounds. They can eat anywhere from about 2.4 pounds of fish a day to 42 pounds a day. They have amazing vision and hearing, and so they often hunt in those groups. So they underwater, their retina is very different than ours and more eyeglass shape, and so they can see really, really well in the water. They also use their vibrissae or their whiskers like fingers or hands. They can feel vibrations in the water, and they use them to determine where objects are located. So that really helps them be really great hunters. All right, so let's talk about the Block Island seal population. Prior to 2018, seals were reported on a seasonal basis on the island. So we would see them mostly in the winter months when they're mating, when they're pupping, when they're molting. But then in the summer, we didn't really get too many reports of them. And our reports were really sporadic. So if you look at this chart here, it's kind of hard to see in the back. But for example, 2011, between sightings, so sightings are healthy animals that we get reports of. We send a responder out to check on them and they look fine and we keep them in the field. Strandings are animals that are either deceased or we get a report of them and they clearly need medical attention. So we bring them in for rehab. So 2011, between their sightings and strandings, we had 1 animal. 2012, 0, 2013, 7 total, 2014, 1, 3. And then you see 2018 hit, and that's when we had 13 strandings. 2020, we had to halt all of our responses due to COVID, so that's kind of an outlier year. But then you see our strandings and sightings and our response efforts really jump. So we have 20 animals in 2021, 21 animals 2022, 30 animals in 2023, and then 44 animals in 2024 so far. And we're only halfway through the year. So things are getting really busy for us, which is why we're so grateful again for our partnership with BIMI and all the help that they provide, because we are on island all the time, which I will never complain about having to come here for a seal response. But we are here a lot and it's getting really busy. And this is all in addition to the other strandings and responses we have on the mainland here. We're also seeing, in addition to the seal population increasing, we're seeing a lot of people on island. A lot of tourists come here, which is great. But one thing that's leading to is an increase in these human interaction cases. So federally protected species, you're supposed to stay 150 feet away, and we don't want to disrupt the population and their natural behavior. But we're seeing a lot of people who, a lot of it is just misinformation, or people don't understand because they've never maybe seen these species before or interacted with them, but don't understand the laws that protect them. So there's an obvious need for more outreach and education on island about this. We're also seeing an increase in seal entanglements. Our numbers have jumped tremendously. This is kind of one example from the camera at the North Light of just how many people are going out there frequently. And this is just one photo I pulled, but we have many. There's often a lot more people than this, but people are bringing bikes out there. So we'll notice a bunch of seals hanging out at the point in the morning, but then they get disrupted and go in the water. Another thing that's a little more worrisome is we're starting to see these seals become habituated and getting used to people. So a lot of the younger animals are used to seeing people on that North Light a lot now. So they're not getting scared and going back into the water, which could eventually be a safety concern. If they're letting people go right up to them, that could be a safety concern for anyone who doesn't understand that these animals might bite and can carry diseases. So that's another reason why it's so important that we do have people out there monitoring these interactions and what's going on. This is a quick snapshot of just some of the entanglement cases we've had this year. Meg can correct me, but we're up to 19 or 20. 19 cases this year alone. And so we are seeing a lot more seals on the island. And I think a lot more people are aware about our program and we're putting our number out there. So we could have missed entanglements in previous years, but I do think that we are seeing a lot more seals entangled. So this is something that can be really challenging for us because these are active animals. And when you think about a really young animal that's still growing, they get entangled in something and they essentially grow into it. So these cases, we usually have weeks to months to get these animals. So that's why it's been so valuable to have Meg, which I'll speak to her position in a little bit, out on island more because she's able to really monitor when these animals are hauling out and when they're in a really ideal spot for us to get hands on them and initiate a response, because often they get spooked so easily that as soon as we hike a mile out there to go get them, they see us and they run back, or they undulate back into the water. But yeah, so definitely an increase in these entanglement cases out here. All right, so as I mentioned, we really wanted to work towards increasing our presence on island and also our signage and bringing more awareness to the issues that we're seeing. So we were really fortunate. We got some funding from the state of Rhode Island to hire our data specialist, so Meg. In the past, we just haven't had the resources to really study this population closely and crunch some data and survey them. So it's been really, really great having Meg because she's on island 3 days a week. And she goes out to the North Light at least once a day when she's out here, sometimes twice a day. And she studies these seals. She does a population count. And she also will monitor for those entangled or stranded animals, which has been a blessing having her out here. But also, I will say our rehab numbers have like tripled this year, I feel like, because every time Meg comes out here, she happens to find an animal that needs some medical attention. So actually, all 4 seals that we are releasing on Thursday morning are from the North Light of Block Island, too. So Meg's been great. She conducts her surveys. She's monitoring for these stranded animals. And then she tries to put up a little barrier when she comes out there just to kind of help mitigate people getting too close to these seals. All right, so here are some of her results from her population counts. From March, you can see our range from our counts go from 102 animals to about 319. April was our biggest month. Meg had a count, which I think was actually someone sent us a drone photo. We counted 715 seals at the North Light. So that's our highest count that we've had. It makes sense for April because the seals pup in about January, February. Then they're going to go through this molt and then they're going to mate. So this is a time of year that we would typically see more seals out at the North Light. But you can also see that now the numbers are dropping. So May, the top survey count was 480 animals. June was 96. And then July, 162 was your highest count. So pretty much the counts have been around 50 animals, though, when Meg comes out here. So definitely we're seeing less seals on the island or at the North Light. And then this is just a graph showing some of the counts and the trends. And so any circle that's in orange, that's a drone photo that we received and conducted a count virtually from that. And then all the blue dots are visual counts. So you can also tell that our aerial shots are really helpful because it's hard for Meg to see seals in the water from land a lot, but those aerial shots really help us do a really accurate population count. We're also seeing some interesting behavior and population dynamics at the North Light. So this is the first year that we've really seen seals come all the way up into the dunes. And so Meg's been really taking some great information and recording data on the interactions she's seeing with younger seals hanging out in certain areas, and then what seals are coming up all the way into the dunes. It's interesting, seals, it's a natural behavior for them to go inland. We do research on Monomoy Island, an uninhabited island, and usually all of our work and field work that we're doing is in the middle of the island. The seals aren't along the shoreline a lot of times. So it's interesting to start to see this population moving into the dunes more. And then this is a really exciting project. So this is one of our collaborations with BIMI here. And I don't want to give away too much information because I know John Dodd's going to be coming here soon to give a shark talk to you all. But we all had a lot of questions. So we're seeing a lot more seals at the North Lake. And John Dodd from Atlantic Shark Institute called me one day. He's like, Sarah, what do you think? Like, where are these seals coming from? Is the population at the North Lake growing? Is it redistributing from Cape Cod? So, and I wasn't sure because we never had the resource to do a lot of counts at the North Lake throughout the year and look at that. So this is a new project that we're doing, and we're trying to answer those questions. So are the food resources at the Cape kind of getting to the point where now seals are coming over here because it's kind of topped off over there for the population size? Or is the population at the North Lake actually growing? And so we have started not only putting satellite tags on the seals that we release, but we're also putting acoustic tags on these seals. And this is a really cool project because we're the first organization, at least within the United States, to put acoustic tags on our seals. Typically, when you put acoustic tags on fish and sharks, from what I understand, it's invasive in the sense that it goes into the animal. Marine mammals have a lot of protections for them. So we weren't able to do it and apply a tag that way. We didn't want to. So we are applying a acoustic tag, which I have a picture coming up, onto a flipper tag that we already apply to these animals at release. Just to give you an example of the difference between these tags, a satellite tag costs about $5,500 per tag. This gives us about 3 months of data if the battery lasts that long. So it's a very short time period of data, but it's giving us real time location. It tells us temperature. It tells us the depth that these seals are swimming, which is really important. And so we are really excited about some of the data that we've gotten from these satellite tags, which I have another slide. I'll talk about that. And then the acoustic tags basically work by pinging when the animal is within a certain distance from a receiver. So right now around Block Island and the Rhode Island coastline between Atlantic Shark Institute and DEM's receivers, we have 43, which is really great. And so these get pulled about 2 or 3 times a year. And then you take all the data off of those receivers at that time. So we can't see real-time data, but it's going to be really interesting to see how, because we acoustic tagged fish and all sorts of species. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the seals, if they're near sharks, if they're feeding on a certain type of fish. So really, really cool project. This is how we apply the satellite tags. This photo on the left looks really harsh. We did not cut the seal's head off, but this is called a doghouse, we call it. It really helps us calm the seal down. We sedate them a little bit because gray seals are very feisty, but we need them to be really still to apply the satellite tag. So we apply it with epoxy. It's not going to hurt them. It's glued to their fur, and then they're going to molt that fur off once a year. So the tag's going to fall off during that molt. And this is what they look like on the right there. Once that tag is applied, we call it a little backpack that they get released back to the ocean with. All right, and then this is that acoustic tag. So you'll see on the left, the acoustic tag is wired and applied with epoxy to a flipper tag. It's essentially like a cattle tag that we put in the webbing, like an ear piercing, in their flippers. So they get released with a unique identification tag. So that number is only going to be on that animal. So if a photo is taken of them and their flippers are in the air, we can identify them through our database with that. And then also we'll have this acoustic tag on them as well, which will ping on different receivers. All right, so this is a snapshot of our sat tag data from this year. We collaborate also with Ørsted on this project because they were wondering about animal movements before construction, during construction, and then after construction of wind farms. So they are a collaborator with this project as well, as they're providing some of these satellite tags for us so we can learn more about animal movements because this has never been done before. So we don't really have a lot of data to compare it to. So it's really interesting information. But you can see that a lot of our seals are up by Newfoundland. We have had 3 seals, harp seals, make it to Newfoundland within 3 to 4 weeks, which is really impressive. A lot of people ask us if we have to release seals where they are found, and the answer is no. And this is why. They travel very far distances in very short periods of time, and they hardly will stay in the same area once they get released. We have, which is also interesting, had a lot of seals make a pit stop at the North Light once they get released. And then on some of them, we've had 2 seals actually hang out here, which is cool because Meg has seen them during her surveys. So it's really neat to get to see them thriving out there. And that kind of indicates the success of our rehabilitation. And then a lot of them have kind of made their way up north to Maine, New Hampshire, and Canada. All right, so why are seals so important? Seals are sentinels of our environment. So we can learn so much about how the climate is affecting these animals, whether it's ocean acidification, which is a big thing as well. We're actually seeing a lot of animals come in with disease, and they seem to be very resistant to a lot of medications that typically would treat a lot of the illnesses that they come with. So we're having to look to hardier and hardier antibiotics that we really don't want to have to go to that level. But a lot of the culture results that come back indicate that that's the only antibiotic that these animals are susceptible to. So that could be indicative of human health as well if these animals are getting exposed to things in the environment. And a lot of the bacteria with warming waters is able to survive longer in the environment than it would have previously in cooler conditions. Seals are a really vital part of the ecosystem. They transfer nutrients. So their swimming and movements is actually stirring things up. And so that's making the ecosystem more nutrient rich, which is really important. They also help the economy, providing recreational and tourism opportunities. So I know I just saw that there's a seal tour around Block Island now, which seems to be new. And so it's helping to draw the economy and honestly inspire the public to protect the environment. So seals are cute. They have those big eyes and they're very relatable to dogs. A lot, I hear that. And so it's one way to really draw people in and help them connect to an animal and then help have that inspire them to take action to protect the environment that these animals live in. So a lot of value in these animals, and we're very, very excited to continue studying them because right now we don't have a lot of answers, but this is the first year of this project, and we're excited to see the comparisons and trends from that data for years to come. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And so you'll see us more because we're going to be collaborating more with BIMI. Our missions really align between our 2 organizations with our education and conservation of the local habitat and environment. So yes, we're very excited, and you'll be seeing us more out here, that's for sure. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, the height of the seal population was really in April, and now it's really declined, especially in the summer. So I think a lot of that is due to they're on land for a while during mating and molting and the pupping stage, which is typically around that February till April timeframe. So I think that could be a factor for why our numbers are higher. And I do think that the temperature can affect them being on land more versus in the water. And they're going to follow the food resources. If the food resources were all in this area, then they would probably stay here because why would they exert more energy than they have to? So it could be indicative of their food resources shifting as well, which will be really interesting to see that acoustic tag data. So we're also seeing really low numbers of harbor seal pupping years within our network. So typically in Maine is where the harbor seals pup. So we're not sure. We had avian influenza, unusual mortality event recently and come in past years. So we don't know if that knocked out some cohorts of seals or if the warming water temperatures are forcing them, more up north, and that's where they're pupping. So it's interesting. the field's changing really quickly, and we're learning from the animals what's going on in the environment, but it's hard even for us to kind of keep up with everything because it is changing so rapidly. Yeah. Do I think that some of the marine mammal deaths are attributed to the windmills? I will say that so far, so we, in terms of whales, what we have seen, and I wish I had our whale numbers, but I recently just sent a reporter our whales. They wanted to know how many strandings we see every year. And for dolphins, on average, I'd say, but from 2016 till present, we've seen about 13 to 15 dolphins wash up deceased, which we do see that often. And so that's not unusual. For the whales, it's very obvious when we see a vessel strike case. So we look for it's interesting investigation. So you're going to look in the whale's stomach, and if that stomach is full of fish and they're in good body condition, they were probably healthy and actively eating at the time of death. And then you want to flense back the blubber, and you're going to look at their muscle and blubber layers and see if there's any bruising or hemorrhaging that would be indicative of some sort of trauma. And then often you can find fractured bones as well. And we take samples of all the organs and tissues, and you send that off to a pathologist, and they can analyze the cells and determine if that trauma was caused postmortem or antemortem as well from the tissue sample. So far, I have not seen anything that could be attributed to the wind farms, but there's also so much that's not known. So that's what we're trying to find out. But most of the whales that I have necropsied are vessel strike cases or very obvious infectious disease cases, very skinny animal, kidney damage, brain swelling, abnormal tissues, parasites. I mean, there's morbillivirus and brucella are two very common things that we see in whales, and especially minke whales. We do see infectious disease a lot in that particular species. So it's also species dependent on what we're seeing mortalities attributed to. Yeah. We don't. And so, yeah, so the question was, do we have necropsy results back from, sorry, there's a horse walking by. I love Block Island. Would not see this on the mainland. Do we have necropsy results from the whale in June? No, we don't. So that was a really sad case. That whale was very decomposed when it washed up. It's interesting. So on the outside, an animal might look like they aren't super decomposed, but when you think about a whale, they have such thick blubber, they're a furnace. And so all it takes is a day or 2 days, and those organs are autolyzed, and it's very difficult to get tissue samples internally on a whale that size, particularly without machinery. We typically use excavators, front loaders to help us with our necropsy, because otherwise it could take, we have a staff member who used to work in South Carolina who didn't have access to that machinery, and it took her 2 days. So you want to get to the whale as quickly as possible with that machinery because of how quickly it decomposes. So for that, we were only able to collect skin and blubber samples, some baleen, so we can learn more about hormone levels, which you can learn more about like stress hormones from stuff like that, and then their DNA and genetic information too. But we weren't unfortunately able to go internally, which was really unfortunate. We all wanted to so badly, but the location was very difficult. And it stinks because we actually knew the history of that animal as well. So yeah, it was just a really sad, unfortunate case. Yeah. Yeah, you're speaking about the one that's off the last week in June. Yep. Yep. Dory's Cove. Yeah. It's a humpback whale. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a great question. What are we doing to help educate people about the federal regulations that protect these animals? So our first step, well, we did put some signage at the North Light, mostly just about calling our hotline, which is older signage. We did get some grant funding to get new signage. So we're working on making that, which will be really great. And we actually have a team from Mystic coming out here tomorrow to get some footage. So we're going to put a QR code on it that links to a website and a video and everything. We have Meg out here 3 days a week. So she's out there outreaching with people, trying to intervene before people get too close. So she's running around. She's getting her steps in, that's for sure. And then Bimmy's been fantastic having interns help. We had a collaborative internship last year with an intern that came and worked with us a couple days and came out here to help Bimmy and help with outreach. So we're trying to work together to pool our resources because it does take a lot of effort. But one thing we are doing is working on improving and making more signage around the island as well. So, Judy, yeah. Oh, yeah. What's your question? So what happens when we find a seal tangled up? Great question. So that's always a really tough case because we want to disentangle that seal obviously as quickly as possible. But we also always have to make sure our safety is first. People and the public safety comes first before anything. And a lot of times when a seal is tangled up, they're stressed out and they also are really active still. So the North Light, particularly, that's where a lot of our entangled seals are. It's a tricky area because of that point and us being able to get access to the animals. So we have some very savvy responders. So Bimmy, Aaron, and Meg, and we've been training up the amazing interns here as well and staff to sneak up on these seals. But we also have to make sure the seal is removed from the whole pack of them out there in the herd, so we don't disrupt the whole herd of them into the water. So it's tough because a lot of things have to align for us to be able to get hands on the animal. And a lot of times it almost takes the animal to get to that debilitated state where they're weak and sick. They're not going to move as quickly. And that's when we're typically able to get them easier. But we have been successful with a handful, 4 cases this year with bringing them back for rehab. And so that obviously leaves 15 seals still out there, which sounds like a lot. But that's why we're monitoring for them all the time. Yeah. Oh, yes, great question. If you were to find a seal, just give us a call. We have our hotline number, which I should have put on here and I did not. But if you call the Mystic Aquarium, oh, it's right here on the bottom. Perfect. Yeah, if you guys want to take a photo on your phone of the bottom of this before you leave, give us a call because often Meg's out here or someone's out here. And then if you call our hotline, we'll be able to notify Meg and she can go out there and try to get the seal. One thing I didn't mention is we actually have gear caches stashed around the island too. One at the North Light, which is essentially a kennel, crowding boards, rope, and a lot of different gear we might need for a response. So that helps to kind of stash it out there because it's challenging to walk a mile out there and kennel a seal and not have a kennel with you or have to carry it every time. So we've stashed one out there for easier access. Yeah. Yeah, one of them was an entanglement case. The other 3 cases had wounds, if I remember correctly. So they had big abscesses and different potentially predation wounds. Coyotes can get these guys, or other seals can sometimes bite them. There's aggression from adult male seals on younger animals. So they had puncture wounds and that were really badly infected, and sometimes they can get bone infections from it as well. So one of them was an entanglement case, and I think 3 of them were wound cases. Yeah, good question. Why ham and acid? This is our first time using ham and acid. So we typically release our seals in Rhode Island, Blue Shutters Beach, mainly just because it's a nice big beach and easy access with a parking lot for us. But we chose Hammonasset because we've never done a seal release in Hammonasset, especially a facility that's in Connecticut. We wanted to provide that opportunity for people who maybe live in the New Haven or like Stamford kind of area to be able to come up for release, because a lot of people can't make it to Rhode Island. I'm suspicious. The question was, would the seals wind up back here? I'm suspicious that some of them will. Usually we see them come back to Black Island within like a day or two of release. So Meg will be out here. We'll definitely be watching that satellite tag info closely. And we have an animal rescue page on Facebook for anyone who's Facebook savvy. And we usually put updates about our seal tags and the maps on our Facebook page as well. And then Val and I are working on some plans. We're going to do a seal release out here probably in the fall for anyone who's out here. So we'll stay tuned for that. We'll provide more information. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, good question. So the question was, we don't have to release them where we found them. So do they form family bonds? Seals are very solitary. We actually sometimes have two of them in a pool together, and you'll often see them like doing this, like get away from me to each other. They will hunt in a group together during mating season. You'll see them, congregated on the North Light. And so they are very solitary in the sense that we see them just kind of veer off on their own, but then they will kind of come together occasionally, at the North Light and stuff too. So they don't have like a family per se, though. They're not going to travel like a pod of dolphins would or whales together. But you do see them like playing, the younger animals particularly playing together at the North Light in the waves and stuff like that. But then they'll go off on their own. So if we release 4 together, they won't. I will put money on them not staying together. They're all going to kind of do their own thing. Any other questions? Yeah, on the way back. Yeah, so that's a good question. Data on the seals' diets. The paper I was looking at was from the Cape, and that was the 48% of their diet were the sand eels. The other percent around here, I honestly don't know. I'm very interested to see. I think the acoustic tag data is going to shed some light on some of that. And then also, I was talking to some of our partners at DEM, and they actually had an acoustic tag that was on a skate. The acoustic tag was on the North Light. So the seal must have eaten the skate and then pooped it out. But yeah, so I don't know around here what they're eating. But our research team, that's actually one of the projects that we're also partnering with Orsted on. They're collecting seal poop from haul outs and then analyzing that poop to determine what species they're feeding on. So I don't have the results from that yet, but there are projects going on that are looking at that. So hopefully next year I'll have some more information for you on that. Yeah, tools. That's a good point. They're smart. They're very smart animals. So they're gonna try to get food as easily as they can. And that's definitely one way. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll be hanging around for a while. So if anyone wants to come up or has any questions, feel free to come on up and hopefully see a lot of you around the island as we'll be out here a lot more. So thank you.
That was wonderful, Sarah. And next week, we'll have kind of a follow-up talk. John Dodd will be here to talk about the sharks in Block Island. And we know there's a seal-shark relationship, and we're gathering data to try to work that out. I'll also tell you, we know we've had huge blooms of sand eels around the island the last few years. Yeah, I mean, that's the sand lance. It's a little minnow, and most of the fish we catch that's what they're eating. So I didn't know seals ate that too. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. Come to Bimini anytime, and certainly come next Tuesday. Thank you.